Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Loss of a Lieutenant. I am your host, Jacob, and I am joined by.
Nick?
And Josh.
Oh, we're getting so good at it. Today, we're going to cover the recovery or what to do when you get Alfred. It's a potentially unfortunate, really fortunate part of the game. And it's key to know what to do when you suffer an alpha and how to maybe recover from it. But before we get into our main segment, let's just do a quick catch up and see what we've all been doing. Josh, what have you been up to?
Well, we've been having our regularly scheduled hobby nights become much more regularly scheduled
Yeah, I think
now.
it's
So
3 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row now. You've gotten
yeah,
them
yeah,
done.
yeah. Kevin's taken it upon himself to sort of, keep himself accountable. Um, his partner's away on a work trip, so I think he's feeling a bit lonely. So he gathers all the boys together, and we. I didn't attend yesterday's.
So if you too want to keep a lonely Scottish man company on a Monday night over Discord, it's about 7 o'clock every Monday night.
Australian
Kevin,
Eastern Standard Time.
yeah, Australian Eastern Standard Time. Thank you. So Melbourne, Sydney time. The Kevin gets on and a bunch of, and then it's just there to sit, talk about
Yeah.
Infinity, do hobby together, and honestly talk about mostly anything. I don't know how often the conversations stick to Infinity. I remember them generally going off into whatever the fuck.
I think we spent the last Nick, old Nick came on. Nicky Toohill, Nicky No Breaks came on the call, and we started just talking about Song of Ice and Fire for a solid like half an
Oh my
hour.
god, no!
So yeah, if you
No.
want to hear about any other game system other than Infinity, join us at those things. We had about 12 people jump on last week, which I
Oh,
was
awesome.
a part of, but I don't know about yesterday because I wasn't around. More work things. And apart from that, I've had a couple of games, mostly getting some. A couple of new people have come out of the woodwork with Tristan organising a slow grow, as well as I think Guff Werribee is having a escalation league. So we've had some new people join the community here in Melbourne, Victoria, and around some not some intro games, but some like lower points games for a newer guy, Perry. It's good. He took getting Alfred quite well, and we had to re-rack a couple of times, so I've got some pertinent
Oh,
experience.
you'll be able to talk about being the asshole who did that, do the alpha.
Yeah, I was.
Oh.
It was definitely not necessarily a positive new player experience, but we'll talk about that
Nick,
later.
yourself, you gotten up to too much?
Got in a few games. Did a nice little mini 3 day or three game weekend at a friend's house, and was dabbling with assassins, trying out the AR, and I got to live the AR dream because in one game I used the AR to one round Duroc, or not just one round, one order killed Duroc.
Okay, that's
And
well done.
then the next game used an AR to drop McMurder in one order
Ooh, that's pretty.
because
That's it. That's
that
it. Are you talking? Were you using the breaker rifle profile?
no viral pistol plus one burst with surprise attack -6,
Ah, that would do it.
because that means they're dropping smoke at their feet at fizz -3, and that's not in their favor against three burst. Um, and on top of that, I managed to zapper uh, Wallace in my game against John.
See, I knew it. I knew it. The IO was fucking top tier. Just know everyone's sleeping on it.
I don't
Yeah.
know if in top tier, but I think there is a place for them.
Yeah.
Certainly good against Ariadna, that's for certain.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah,
fact that I went up against two Ariadne back was probably part
I
of it.
mean even their because the +1 burst vial, that's on all their profiles, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you really wanted like an anti Ariadna model, the IR with breaker rifle is just like everything I do hits the thing that you have, which is 0.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm liking. I ran both the breaker and the shock marksman, and I think I'm pretty much going to stick to the breaker rifle, partly because that has the zapper on it, and the shock marksman does not have a template.
Yeah, that makes sense. I miss the old. I think they used. Did they used to have a sniper rifle?
I don't think they ever did,
Maybe
but
it
I
was
could
always a
be wrong.
marksman.
It might. Yeah, I think it's always been a marksman, but I haven't. I didn't play in N3, so I could be wrong.
This is where I get to do my favorite thing,
Yeah.
which is open up the app that I refuse to delete, which is the
Hmm.
old
Yeah.
Infinity.
Okay.
As for me, I haven't done a huge amount of gaming, so to speak. But I have given into not fuck it, whatever. Given into peer pressure, and I am diving headfirst into trying to get my Bakunin painted. If you look behind me, you'll see 3 models in my little painting thing. That is 2 Moiras and the Stigmaton.
Fantastic. So
So
are you
I
bringing to
am.
Arc?
Don't know about that one. Because while I am trying to be dedicated to painting, I am still slow as shit. Yeah, they did. They used to have a sniper rifle profile.
Okay.
Eh, sad. I think like back then that was sort of the only thing that really made sense, but they didn't have forward deployment, I think, back then. Hence why it
Mhm.
was made more sense. Yeah. Ooh. Hmm. All right, enough reminiscing about
Yeah.
N3 IRs.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so that's our sort of hobby catch up for today. Let's just recap our challenges. Just before, I'm going to let the other two go through them. Just a reminder that we have changed from doing one monthly and one quarterly challenge, um, and have moved to doing 2 quarterly challenges, one focusing on the hobby, the other one focusing a bit more on the game of Infinity. Um, so that's makes it easier on us because we only have to deal with sort of 2 sets of submissions, but it also means that we're able to follow CB's trend of moving towards more box sets by being able to provide 2 box sets every quarter to our random lucky participant. So, quarter 1 gaming challenge. I'm gonna say, Josh, take it away.
All right, we've got our quarter one gaming challenge, which is to make them an offer they can't refuse. With that transition to longer form gaming challenges, which we've just talked about, we'd like to set our real challenge for our listeners. So, like crime in Hollywood's version of New York, we want you to get organized. We at Lost Lieutenant want you to plan and run an event for your local players and tell us about your experience. If you tell us about the event and give it a real fun name, I'll even put it on our socials for people all across the world to see and maybe come along if they're in the area. Doesn't have to be an ITS event, just a group of playing 3 games in your garage will fulfill the requirements of the challenge. Custom missions, resilience ops, reinforcements, free play are some of the many ways we all join Infinity, so break them out too. Submit your entry as a Google Doc to us at lossoflieutenant@gmail.com, and one random winner will be selected to win a small box of their choice from a retailer to be determined.
Yeah.
yes.
Nick?
And our hobby challenge for the first quarter is New Year, New Me. So, New Year means the next round of tournaments, which, if you're anything like Josh, means you get a new army off the shelf and paint it. So, this quarter, it's a freeform challenge. Show us something that you have started and finished this year. Uh, Model you're excited about to use this year, put on your display board, show off in front of your friends, avoid the whole Silver Surfer thing, or even building table or terrain to play on. Have at it, whatever you feel like, as long as it's new. So send your finished entries along with some progress pictures as a Google Doc to same thing, lossoflieutenant@gmail.com. And one random winner will be selected to receive a small box of your choice from a retailer to be determined.
Boom. And now on to our second set of community announcements, which is our events announcements. So just a little bit on that Quarter 1 challenge. If you are organizing a sort of a big ITS-esque event or sort of a narrative, something you want to be a little bit bigger than just mates in a garage, nothing wrong with that. Hit us up, send us your event, and we'll announce them just like we are now. And our first event, and I'm really excited that we got one of these, is called Gothfinity. So this is happening on the 30th of March in Gothenburg, Sweden. So this is an international, as far as we're concerned, tournament. It's 3 rounds, 300 points with the Mercs add-on. The missions are Last Launch, Looting and Sabotage, Frostbite. And for more information, you can contact the local war corps, Dogborn. We'll put his email in the show notes because, to be honest, I'm not even going to attempt to say what his email is.
So next up, we've already mentioned it, this show, Arcfinity. So Arc 40K has been a premier 40K event for the last several years in Victoria, and they're now turned into a convention with all sorts of gaming. So Kev and the folks at Melbourne Wargaming Incorporated have organized a 2-day Infinity tournament to take place there. 27th and 8th of April at Sandown Racecourses in Melbourne, Australia. 300 points. There is a painting requirement for this because that's part of the ARC convention. The missions will be Superiority, Frostbite, Acquisition, Mindwipe, and Cutthroat. And tickets are available through the ArcFest website.
And last but certainly not least, we've got another Victorian tournament that we've talked about already. New South Welshman.
Technically, it's in New South Wales.
Yeah. We've got Border Bash. It's another Melbourne Wargaming Incorporated baby. A spiritual successor to the much missed and beloved Nova Corps. It is the 8th and 9th of June 2024, which is the King's Birthday long weekend here in Victoria. It's at the Mirrabina Community Centre in Lavington, New South Wales, just north of the Victorian New South Wales border. It's going to be a 2-day, 5-round event, power pack, acquisition, evacuation, frontline, and supplies. And see the Facebook event for more details.
Just to remind all our listeners, new and old, that we are on Patreon. So if you'd like to support what we do, want to hear our dulcet tones a little bit more, you can support us for just $3 a month. We understand that not everyone is able to financially commit to supporting this little podcast that we do. We know that times are tough. And if that's the case, we just ask that you let Aleph know that you like us, that you listen to us by liking and following, reviewing where you see your podcast on Facebook, on YouTube. We have a YouTube. And just anywhere that you see the name Loss of Lieutenant. Join our Discord. I'll always put an invite link in the episode description. I should say members' benefits include participation in raffles when we get little review models from Corvus Belli. We use your money to go get them painted up professionally. So we got the IR and the Marut done up, and they were both fucking beautiful, as well as the access to the Patreon only portion of the server where you get to watch us make these recordings live.
Okay, so on to the main topic for today. So you just got alphaed. Goal of this is to look at how to recover from being alphaed. Probably should start by
But Nick,
defining what we say of
what's
yes,
being alphaed?
yes. um, so being alpha would be when your opponent goes first and they hit you hard. So they've removed most of your key pieces. I would say probably 40% or more of your order pool's been lost. These may be flexible depending on who you ask, so don't hold me to specific numbers. Uh, Basically, to the point that your plans have pretty much just gone out the window, and you have to figure out what do I do from here.
I might mention one other thing that
Yes.
I think we overlooked a little bit just because of the way Infinity is. This is not
Hmm.
for any other game, but I would also say if they've managed to kill your lieutenant, it's not the worst alpha, but
Hmm.
considering generally they're pretty deep in and like protected, it can be pretty
Hmm.
devastating, especially first turn.
Yeah. Uh, as a note, being alpha can be devastating, and sometimes it is devastating to the point that you cannot recover. We're not going to touch on those because if you can't recover, there's nothing to discuss. Have a nice chat with your opponent, figure out what went wrong, what went right for them, and try to avoid that in the future.
And if you're at a tournament, go get lunch.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
even if it's
That's one thing always
9:30
to
in the morning.
yeah, that's one thing always to remember is if you're at a like a like tournament like CanCon and you get your ass kicked, you're at a convention. Just be like, peace out. I'm gonna spend the next hour and a half while you guys sweat it out looking at this convention.
Mhm.
uh, do your best Submariner impression.
Hmm.
Yes. So,
Voice
uh,
learner.
yeah, I guess first step, don't panic. Um, so I guess probably start with you go next slide. Uh, Splits up into what type of game are you playing? So are you playing kind of a teaching, learning game, a casual game, or a tournament game? Because you can approach them differently. So for a teaching game, uh, basically make it a learning opportunity. Um, Stop and discuss with your opponent. Any spectators that are there that know the game can also join in. Try to figure out what went wrong, what did you not see, uh, how you could have deployed differently, and you, like I talked about the last time, can you proceed from here?
Yeah,
And if so, how?
I would.
Depending on what learning stage you're at, consider re-racking. But if you're still trying to learn deployment, consider having your opponent keep their original deployment so you can better learn from what you've just discussed.
Yeah, I. I suppose to add that if you are doing like a learning game and you're being the
Mhm.
teacher, or a teaching game
Mhm.
and you're the teacher, um, unless they've sort of, I guess, broken a rule, I guess, of infinity deployment, and you want to just be like, show like, hey, this is how, like, why you don't do that sort of thing. Never really try to go into one of these games to alpha your opponent, even like if you're gonna do it, make it so that it's like three orders, you're already in his face, and you're like, you did this. Like just don't. I can think of one game I had where like the Teutonic Knights were going second, were just like out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, I'll go and punch hard, but then I'm gonna be like, okay, like that's why you don't do that sort of thing. You're always gonna hide. Let's flick back three orders, right? You can move your deployment
Mhm.
around. I don't really care about the order of the game's supposed to go in,
Yeah.
right? Let's just get this game
Mhm.
going again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Focus
I
on
had
making it. Sorry. Go
no.
ahead.
Oh, yeah, I had a similar experience last week. I played a couple of 150 point rounds against a newer player. I in teaching and learning games, I always let my opponent go first, regardless of whether um, there is sort of adventitious, and I tend to not do like stripping of orders either. I let them use their full complement of orders and go first, and
Yeah.
that way I can see how they're going in terms of their uh, in terms of their sort of reaction to my deployment, as well as their sort of basic knowledge of the rules, and
Yeah.
and that way, I'm not just running into them because I know that I can pick apart a new player's deployment. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
And he made some sort of key mistakes, and I came to the realization because I wasn't. This is definitely a mistake on my part. I didn't realize how good Den McConnelly was in 150-point games, and so, and especially when he rolls Fizz +3 and is your Master Breacher in, or is your Keops
Ooh.
in things. So, dodging on 20s is not a fun experience for your opponent in that thing. So that was definitely a learning point for me. But we rolled back. So he went first. Wasn't really able to dislodge me. That might have been a gun choice or a choice for his of his list. I talked about his list. I talked about the way he wanted to do things, and then we immediately re-racked with me keeping my deployment the way it was, allowing him to set up his deployment differently, and maybe making a couple of changes to his lists. I also took Dan McConnelly out of my list and replaced him with like 2 Galwegians, which were significantly less impactful. So yeah, there's lots you can do from the point of view of a teacher to sort of mitigate this. But it's something that we all have to learn how to deal with. And even if you're the person, like I am, the person who always loves to go first. I love alphaing people. I'm a bit Joshy No Breaks. Let me just cripple your thing by using Shinobu to slice and dice smite your tag or whatever. And so I can find that if I'm forced to go second, that I am not the best at defending. So it's a defense is probably the hardest skill, one of the hardest skills in the game to learn, and it's something that we take very seriously.
The learning curve for going second is much steeper than for going first
Yeah,
in Infinity.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And if you're ever like worried about, oh, like, but I got to teach my new players how to deal with, getting alphaed, they'll learn, right? They'll go to a tournament once they feel confident enough, right? They'll make a mistake, right? Someone who doesn't know them will be like, I want to win this tournament, or I want to win this game. They'll get alphaed, right? It's gonna happen. So you don't need to teach people what it feels like to get your shit pushed in Infinity. Right? It'll happen. Right? It happens to the worst of us, it happens to the best of us.
Doesn't happen to Rob, but that's fine.
Someone has to be on the top.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
Okay. So for casual games, it kind of comes down to what are you and your opponent looking to get out of the game? Probably should discuss it with your opponent, and it's okay to re-rack. It's also probably a good idea to practice how you respond to being alphaed, because it's going to be a little bit more forgiving, and you'll have a little bit more flexibility doing it in a casual game than you will at a tournament. So,
Hmm.
casual games kind of either way, play it like a practice game, play it like a tournament game. Yeah,
Also,
depends
going
on
and
what you're
getting
trying to get.
pizza with your mate is equally as fun.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the other, I suppose, the fact is that getting alphaed is not like a feel good moment. So
No.
it's worth in a casual setting where like the guy across for you is a mate to be able to sort of experience those like feel like especially those like feel like those bad like those uncomfortable feelings, right? With somebody who you can probably say, "Oh, this sucks," and they're like, "Yeah, it does suck." Right? So that when you're ready for the time when it comes to get your shit pushed in a tournament, yeah, I would be like, okay, I'm feeling shitty. It's not because I hate Infinity or anything like that. It's
Mhm.
just I got alpha just like when my friend did it to me, right? And yeah,
Mhm.
it sucks, but like I suppose to to I don't know, it's a safe space to just like deal with like getting you right to like getting alpha.
That's a good point. I know there's a guy I played with fairly often, but then the game store we met at closed down for renovations, who was not great at getting alpha. Um, would get very disappointed and kind of get in a doom spiral,
Hmm.
and was trying to figure out how how do I help him with dealing with this. And the result that I came up with was, if that came up, we'd stop, we'd go grab lunch, we'd come back, and then we'd talk about it and then start up again.
Yeah.
And that helped him to get rid of the doom and gloom of, I just lost half my army, and come back with a fresh mind, have time to think about where he wasn't under pressure, and figure out that actually I can still win some of these games.
Yeah. Also, remember that Infinity, by and large, while it is competitive, is also a collaborative game. You know, the one of the first rules in the ITS document that we all love to play by is to work with your opponent. There are points at during the table that during your game that you will need to go. Do we have this line of fire? What's the maths on this? So on and so forth.
Yeah.
And like it's perfectly respectable as the person being alphaed and as the person performing said negative player experience to just make a point to connect with your opponent, especially if it's a casual game, and just say, hey, can you help me, or do you want help unpicking this? Recognize that you've been given a puzzle. And man, I love solving puzzles with my friends more than I love solving them on my own. So absolutely 100% just ask your mate to help you unpick it, because they're probably by and large, being the alpha is a more positive experience than getting alphaed. But there is a level to it where your opponent, you could be going, if you've just been alphaed, you're like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with anything you've got down on the table. But your opponent's like, man, I can see like so many ways that you could completely destroy my game plan.
Yeah.
And so because your opponent knows their list inside and out, knows how it works, knows their army inside and out, just ask them to help you, and they will. Maybe not in a tournament game, but they will
Yeah.
help you in a casual game. Man, I love solving
And
puzzles with my
And
friends.
and
they'll come out of that a stronger player because they just dissected their army from the other side of the table. So they'll now see mistakes they may have made that they can avoid in the future.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
like you'll come out like, I mean, obviously this was a tournament game, but I'm gonna talk about, I was one of the games I had last episode against Ryan Kirby during CanCon, and I hadn't looked at, I really had not really looked at, I guess, like any of the IIS side of Eugene or the vanilla side of Eugene for right, fucking ages. And so if you're in a casual game, you play, he pulls out this list, you're like, oh, I'll just go with what I know, which is what I did in my game. And then suddenly someone comes out with, this incredible alpha using vanilla Eugene. You get to, at the very least in that experience, right, learn, okay, you know, this army is not to be messed with. I can't, make this decision, right? If someone's playing an army this way, or yeah, you hit your opponent will, like you're saying, will say, oh yeah, but if you kill this and this, I'm stuffed. Like I know that when I played Ryan, it was never going to happen. But if I managed to get rid of both his Blue Wolf and his Hack Tau, again, it was never going to fucking happen. Right? I'd be in a okay position because he didn't have much else in the way of guns necessarily, from what I remember anyway. But
No, not in that list.
for a newer player, right, it's useful to know like, hey, I don't have a lot else left. These are the big guns. These are the things you should be aiming for. So yeah, take it as a learning experience. I definitely think if you're the person doing the alpha ring, I don't know about you guys, but I think every single time I've done like a big alpha strike, I've felt like a little bit disappointed in myself, in like, oh, all right, well, this is gonna be a short game, right? And he's not having fun, and my opponent's not having fun. And in a casual setting, I'm more than happy if someone's like sort of frustrated or anything like that to be like, okay, I've put you in a crap position. I don't see much of a way of you getting out of this. Let's just rack it up, do all the rolling again.
Yeah, even just rewinding a couple of orders
Yeah.
and going, this is what you should have done instead. Let's see if we can change the situation by you taking a dodge here instead of a shoot, or
Mhm.
throwing smoke in ARO rather than doing something. So
Well,
Yeah.
there's lots of things that you can do to sort of mitigate the bad feeling in a casual game.
And if you're the one doing the alpha, you're testing something out in this casual game, so like more of a tournament prep sort of situation. And for instance, like I remember trying out my 2 Chimera list. Right, I tried that out. Right, had it gone like really, really well, I would have been like, okay, cool, that works. Let's pull it back. I'll try the other parts of my army. Right, so if you're like doing that sort of thing, be like, okay, cool, that works. Right, start again. Move on to trying out another aspect of your army.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was learning and casual. Now for the meat of the episode. What do you do in a tournament game? So
Yeah,
start
you're
with
missing an all capitals cry silently, but
that's kind of what this is about.
Weep openly.
Yeah. You start with check, like, did you just fail your morale check as a player? Because
good luck.
it's one of the toughest experiences playing Infinity.
Yeah.
It is incredibly demoralizing. So,
And I'll say this, in a tournament setting, unless it is truly, truly like you happen to be not in loss of lieutenant by the grace of like baggage bots, if unless that's you're in that sort of situation, try and resist the urge to just reach across and say GG.
yeah, in Infinity, I would recommend highly against that, against trying to surrender, just because the scoring is so important.
Yeah.
And
I
also, there are a lot of recovery ways you can
yeah.
go about, as we will get to shortly.
I've never
Yeah.
done it, but I've
Mhm.
had it a couple of times,
Mhm.
and it's just like, just try and keep going because
Yeah.
you're in a tournament. People are gonna play hard.
Mhm.
So if in the initial thing you're gonna feel like fuck this, I can't be bothered anymore. Just fight that urge as much as you can.
Yeah. So, deep breaths, relax, all those things people tell you to do that you've probably already tried. Um, don't worry about your mistakes at this point. They've already happened. You can think about them after the tournament. You can think about them between rounds. Now is not the time. It's okay to tell your opponent that you're going to need a minute. Um, they've just drastically changed the board state from what you were planning for. Uh, it could be easier if you slip in a nice compliment, like, "Oh, that's quite the pickle you've thrown me." Compliment them while at the same time going, Give me a minute."
See,
Um,
you're coming at this as an American, Nick. I can tell you
yes.
right now that when someone does that, you can go straight across the table and go, "You motherfucker! I've got no idea what the fuck I'm gonna do." And Australians be like, "Yes, all right, you can." So compliment,
Yes, I did
right?
write this
Sure,
slide.
yeah.
So, uh, one thing to remember: if you have half the orders, that means you can spend twice as much time on each of those orders.
This
So
this is
the
an
clock
awesome point you
pressure
bring up.
is less than you think it is.
Yeah, this is an awesome point that you bring up, and I completely didn't even think about it. Is that if your army is cut in half,
Mhm.
every order you can take twice as long
Yeah.
to decide what you're going to do with it. And by
Yes.
rights, you should be being more careful anyway.
Mhm. So yeah, it's as much as the time pressure is there in the tournament, it's okay, especially after you get alphaed, to say I need a few minutes and I'll not like walk away from the table, but just I'm gonna need to think about this. I need to go into the tank and figure out what to do.
You can walk away from the table as
Yeah, I was
well.
about to say you
No
can
Yes,
worries.
absolutely walk away
yes.
from the table.
Honestly, that's probably another one. If you are actually in a state where um, you may not be the best sportsmanship or best sportsman, um, it's okay to walk away from the table for a minute or two and come back. Um, your opponent will probably appreciate that, um, and hopefully they'll be able to see why.
Yeah. If I
Mm,
mean, look, if you know,
mm,
what worst comes to worst, you're feeling embarrassing by like you need a moment away from the table.
mm,
There's always bloody
mm.
toilets to go to. Just excuse
Yeah.
yourself for a moment, and your opponent's not gonna mind because they've just put you in a hard position, and they're just like, "Yep,
Hmm.
I'll be happy to sort of bask
Yeah.
in the glow of the destruction that I have just rained upon my opponent."
Yeah.
And when in doubt, weep openly. It's fine.
Yeah, pity points.
Yeah.
This would be-
Okay.
I you say that, it reminds me of the story I read once. I won't go through all of it, but it's the Warhammer story where a guy's about to kill someone's Farseer, and they put their hand in front of it to try and stop their opponent, and they're like, "Please, please don't kill my Farseer!" And they're like, "What are you doing, dude?"
You can't see it.
Yeah,
What?
he's like, "No, please." It's like a little kid in a tournament. He's like, "No, I haven't been able to do anything with my Farseer yet."
Please don't.
Hand of Mork versus foot of
Yeah,
Cork, or what? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So next one. Um. So don't forget your tactical phase. Um. At this point, seriously consider consolidating your command groups. If you've had a third to a half your army go missing, you may be at the point where you just shove everything into group one.
Yeah.
Um, but don't forget when you do this to save a command token if you need to reform a fire team.
Yeah. Similar to this is
Hmm.
with consolidating groups is
Hmm.
if you already have a fire team but you've been put in loss of lieutenant, you might have to consider. I mean, you've been put in a tough situation, burning all of your command tokens to keep that fire team
Hmm.
together.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to this one. It's
Okay.
yeah, you're
It's a
right.
pretty short one.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you do need to like even if it's like um thinking thinking a round or two ahead and um pulling an order that you might not necessarily use in group two into group one or either because that does generate three more orders for you
Yeah.
across the whole game, especially if it's just a cheerleader, or even if you've got I don't know two specialists in group two that haven't been killed, but everything in group one has died. You need to like so you need to split those guys so they can do the best work they can,
Yeah,
um,
that's a good point.
and move them if you don't have the order efficiency of like duos or whatever if you're playing vanilla
Mhm.
especially sometimes you just need to split them in order to complete the mission, and so consolidating groups is a very good idea, or even spending a couple of command tokens to switch the models around because you need fewer orders on something that moves 6/4 than you do on that specialist in your DZ that moves 4/4. um, so swapping Wallace and your volunteer paramedic not necessarily a bad idea, or even swap something into your group that can form a new fire team. Um, I've often um, seeded wildcards throughout my whole list, especially easy in Ariadne, I must admit, in order to be able to do that if something drastically bad does happen, you can spend a couple of command tokens to gain much more order efficiency and extra dice or whatever by slamming that wild card back into another fire team.
And don't forget, and this is honestly, it's probably going to be something I could repeat every single slide, is don't forget of any of the abilities that you have to take advantage of during the tactical phase. The main one here is if you manage to still have a Strategos 1
Yes.
lieutenant, just don't forget it. I mean, even in your opponent's phase, don't forget things like after being alpha, don't forget regeneration, or anything that can help you recover. So there's that moment of, take a breath and all that sort of thing. Try and remember everything that you can do in these particular phases.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and yeah, just try and remember all the abilities. So I think, especially for a newer player, to Tigos, the fancy thing is they're converting the lieutenant order.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when you're in these situations where you really appreciate what you can do with the moving of guys for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's excellent point.
So, next up, assessing the situation, the scenario objectives. Uh, it's not the most fun question to ask, but can you still complete the main scenario objectives? Uh, if you can, great, go for them. If not, you need a new plan. Uh, Focus on whatever objectives you can complete. Go for minor objective points. Uh, go for tournament points, like denying your opponent so you can get a defensive bonus. Uh, Best example I can think of was our last game, Josh, where we played Frostbite. Um, I did not push a single button in Frostbite, and we ended up in he won 5-4, and I was one order away from a 5-5 draw. And I don't mean like if I got lucky. I mean I was one conscious movement away from securing the HVT. So just because you can't score the biggest main objective point doesn't mean you're out. You can rack up a lot of stuff with small OP, and if you can keep your opponent from racking up too many, then you can get the defensive bonus, the offensive bonus, maybe.
And try and, depending on the scenario, try and remember that if you that you need to look potentially now at the long game. If you got a
Yes.
scenario where all the scoring is done at the end, acquisition kind of is one that comes to mind, but there are plenty of them. Everything is scored at the very end of the game. So you can focus, you can do that pivot for your first and second turn, and then go back to trying. If you've maybe gotten yourself into a better position, your opponent, maybe your opponent's gotten everything that was sort of out and loose, and now you've sort of whittled them down to where you're kind of on even footing. Then you can pivot back to, okay, I'm going to go back and do the objective. I'm going to see what I can get out of it. And there's nothing wrong with um like focusing on just making it hard for your opponent. So putting a single camo marker near his HVT stops him from getting secure HVT.
Mm-hmm.
So you can start purely with something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stage things too. Not everything has to be completed in one turn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't always have to shoot the snooker ball into the pocket on your first attempt.
Mm.
Sometimes it's better to just get it close to the hole,
And,
and fire it in on your next turn.
yeah.
It doesn't need to happen straight away.
A good example of that is if you get lucky and let's say do 2 wounds to a tag with something that really shouldn't have,
Mm-hmm.
right? except that hey, 2 wounds on a tag is big money right in your situation. You don't need to go and try for it again. You have to be really cautious in this sort of thing of not sinking a bunch of orders into something that might pay off in some like maybe big way, but is super unlikely. You've got to like Infinity's always been a numbers game. You've now really got to consider what's going to give you, if you can rely on it, the best numbers.
2 wounds
Right.
on a tag is sometimes 2 engineer rolls away from being a dead tag.
I mean,
You know, two
2 wounds on
Mhm.
an engineer can be the difference between a dead tag or no command tokens on your opponent and 2 orders down.
Yep. Yeah. Plus, like I said, 2 wounds on a tag. You don't necessarily have to finish it off because your opponent's not going to be putting that into the situations he would have if it had all 3 wounds. Like
No,
that tag is not going to be taking the fair firefights.
yeah, there is. I can think of one. I think the gecko is the only tag that I would say is quote unquote expendable. There is no, and even then, not really. There is no expendable tag in the game,
Mhm.
right? So you do 1 or 2 wounds to it, right? Or like a wound to, let's say, a hack tower or something like that, or
Mhm.
even especially with CA. Josh, you've been playing them. I'm sure that like a wound to the Ski of Oros is something that your opponent's gonna be like, I really would rather keep my Ski of Oros alive right now, right at the very beginning of the game.
depends on. I mean, the Ski of Oros is not a tag.
No, but I'm
Ski of
just
Um,
talking.
Boris
I'm just
hit,
talking like
does
key
not put his head up very
pieces.
often.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't put his head up very often. But I am also just
anachromatic
a
then.
fuck it, we ball Rambo kind of player. So you kill my Ski of Oros. I'll just be a lieutenant somewhere else. It's fine. Um,
Look,
yeah,
my
no, no.
hacker's now
It's a
whip
bad
one.
example. It's a
Yeah.
bad example to bring up a model with
Yes.
Monica.
Uh, um, uh, running my avatar that I have spent more than a third of my list points on, into the open and getting accidentally crit by a Kamau. Yeah, sometimes it happens, and you have what you get 1 wound left on that avatar, and you're like, oh, I forgot to bring Doctor Worm in this one, and I can't afford to have my avatar die because then I've got nothing left. So and then you start taking an avatar never really takes a fair firefight, um, but it's yeah. You start taking the you have to pick and choose your battles very very carefully with a tag on 1 wound or a heavy infantry on 1 wound or
Yeah.
someone your big attack piece that's only got NWI. Yeah, play to your outs.
Okay,
And
so next up, for assessing the situation, what resources do you still have? What offensive resources do you have? So start with what's my best gun on the game on the board, and depressingly, sometimes that's a combi rifle. But you have to remember, burst 3 inactive is still burst 3. There's a lot of things that you could outburst with
A
3 or 4 dice.
lot of things you can outrange with a combi rifle too.
Yep. I'm pretty sure hack, other hack players are quite familiar with how well a Gulam can do with a rifle light shotgun in when it's forced to do something.
Bloody rifle light
yeah,
shotgun.
and I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, you're focusing again on getting the best numbers, and that's going to
Yep.
be trying to get things out of cover,
Hmm.
trying to shoot like impetuous pieces and things like that. So your combo rifle can, at that point, um, can do work.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember. The only one time I can remember, and admittedly, like I wasn't being alphaed or anything like that, but I
Hmm.
remember that I thought I may not have enough orders to complete in unmasking an objective. If I shot the HVT and it ducked down, it was on like a rooftop. Now I think about it, shouldn't have been, but whatever.
Hmm.
Um, And I was like, if I miss this like long range shot, you're gonna drop down, and I don't know if I can get there in time. So instead, I stood up, moderator with a combi rifle. I was like, if they're close enough, I guess they'll have to do. Let's see if this works out, and it did.
Mhm.
Right. So there are things that a combi rifle can do.
Absolutely.
Dice, quantity of dice can win a lot of things.
And always remember that crits exist.
Mhm.
We should point out that
Mhm.
for almost all of these pieces of advice, there is a potential for you're just going to have to YOLO.
Yeah. So, what defensive things do you have left? Like, what ARO pieces do you have left? Do you have models with mines on the table that you haven't normally thought about?
Mm.
Um, and this kind of comes down to, are there focal points on the table, like buttons, that your opponent will have to interact with? And can you defend them to deny them objective points?
I think almost sort of a key thing with like being defensive is, and I
Mhm.
always sort of think about this when I have to play defensively in Infinity, is it's about wasting your opponent's orders on
Yes.
things that don't, at the very least, hurt you.
Hmm.
um I suppose in this case it's about wasting as many orders as they can, if
Hmm.
especially if they've, and we'll get into this later, but especially if like you can slow down their objective getting and they have to sort of switch to focus on that, that gives you a
Hmm.
chance to consolidate. Maybe the second turn is a big nothing burger for your opponent, and that means your
Hmm.
second turn is, you have a chance, then you're in a better position, maybe you're just a little bit further up the table, you can hit them.
Yeah.
And
I guess.
remember, there's only one burst 3 or higher weapon in the game that can't go into suppressive fire, and that's an assault pistol. So, um, suppressive fire could be the difference between saving, like being able to kill something that's making a run to a acquisition objective,
Mm.
or nothing happening, and your opponent
Mm.
scoring those points.
That's a
Yeah.
really good point, actually. Especially for new players who haven't had a chance to use suppressing fire. Suppressing fire can turn like mediocre pieces into absolute monsters. You get something that's close enough within that zero range band, and you're thinking, "Oh, I'll just be able to shoot it easily." That neg 3 plus neg 3 on cover can be a fucking, and burst 3 can be a fucking nightmare to remove. I could not imagine, like, let's say, even like a Fusilier or anything that's like BS12 on suppressive fire.
They're
That
scary, man.
that's that can be
Especially if you can
hard to get
force
rid of.
engagements within 16, but outside of 8. Um, when you can force engagements outside of template range
Mm,
and inside your good, well, on par range
Yep.
band for the suppressive fire, just look for little laneways where you can only see out to 16 inches,
yeah,
and your opponent can't really engage you inside 8. It's a sort of an advanced table reading thing, but you can definitely, there are ways to find out where you can just pop a guy and have him be annoying as possible.
Mhm.
Also,
and
stand your regulars up.
oh yeah, yeah,
Your beast hunter that has a Panzerfaust. He's
and
Mimneg 3. Even if he's out in the open, he's still got a BS10 or BS11 Panzerfaust. He can
yeah.
absolutely kill something
And
if you get lucky.
don't forget about, like, if you've got, some sort of, like Morlock or some sort of melee that you can throw at them, that maybe you're opponent, you're a player that doesn't really like or necessarily going into melee. um it could be like the move is to try and push up this weird irregular piece to try and, scalpel something out of their army. I mean, at the very least, I know the way I ended up taking dog warriors is dog warriors aren't fantastic in close combat, but what they're really good for is you get a dog warrior into a fight with something, doesn't matter what it is, just something. That if that thing's not good at melee, it's stuck there. Right?
Mhm.
More than likely, your opponent is going to have to again waste orders to get that dog warrior off the important part, or they might even kill that important model. Then your dog warrior is free to throw smoke and do all sorts of things and just be fucking annoying.
Mhm.
Um, and remember that if you've been Alfred, you've got limited resources. So if you can, you're probably better off stacking your hazards on the important objective than necessarily
Mhm.
spreading out.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, because at that point you're not so much concerned about protecting your own pieces from your opponent. You're concerned about stopping them from scoring objective points.
yeah, it's not
And so,
it's not hard to
yeah.
deal with a crazy koala or a suppressive on its own, but it's damn difficult to deal with a crazy koala protecting somebody in suppressive fire.
Yes.
And templates.
Mm.
Even a chain rifle can stop an opponent. Like you don't even have to kill a model. You know, saying remember this guy has a chain rifle can put the pause on your opponent.
Yeah.
You know, and like there are so many times that I've been absolutely just stymied by the fact that remember this guy has a chain rifle, and I'm like, oh wow, I can't engage this safely anymore. It's everything's a gamble. You
Or
don't care if you lose your Quang Shi, but boy howdy, Shinobu hates taking a chain rifle to the face.
all that
Um,
reminds me of is the first time I had to deal with tigers. I thought it was like a Gaki where one had the template and the other didn't.
oh,
My opponent
no.
was running both of them, and there's like, no, they have chain colts. I'm like, okay, but this one, he's like, no, it has a chain colt. He got really angry at me because he's like, they have chain colts. I'm like, fuck, how do I deal with these little gremlins that are in my face right now?
You
They've
shoot
all got
them
chain
from
colts.
100 feet away.
They were over the board 2 minutes ago, and I shot at them. Uh, and that's probably one other thing. Is dodging is a huge resource for movement. If you can use it. Right?
Free move is free
Use it to
move.
get up the board. Use it to reposition. Right? Um, and I suppose if unless you got something else, always be dodging because if your opponent can't do anything to you, but like let's say you can hear them, there's no harm in dodging. And if you don't want to do anything, you can just say, I'm not doing anything with that dodge.
You don't have to move.
Yeah,
Mhm.
except if you're in
Yeah,
melee, because you have to roll through engage, disengage.
yeah. You have to get out of the engagement.
Yeah.
But yes,
Mhm. So, final resource should look at is recovery. So this would be your doctors and engineers, uh, and at this point, need to look at order efficiency. It is earlier in the game than usual for looking at order efficiency with engineers and doctors. If you can recover a model in one order with a doctor engineer on bottom of turn one, that model will generate 2 more orders for you. So a +1 total net order gain. If you can recover them in one order. If you recover them in 2 orders, it's now broken even, but you've also postponed those orders till later in the game. So that's kind of decision you have to make based on what your resources are.
Yeah.
So if you're rolling for Hawk Doctors, go for it. If your doctor is a Fusilier paramedic, best of luck. um,
And
in addition, consider recovering key pieces to bleed orders off your opponent. So this would be stuff like standing up your TR bot or anything else that's going to take your opponent more orders to put back down that they're going to have to put back down before they play the mission and that you can bring up for 1 to 2 orders.
yeah,
every list with a TR bot is improved by putting a slave drone or
right
a,
next
or a
to it.
Yard bot or whatever it is,
Yep.
within walking distance of that TR bot.
And outside of blast template range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 3 inches away is perfect. You can't measure it, but you'll learn.
Yeah.
3 this looks like.
I just remember it's 2.5 bases.
Is that how you remember it?
I'm just giving advice here. It's like 2.5 bases. So you just be like, don't do that. The other thing, and this goes to, I suppose, that sort of YOLO mentality, is remember that for the most part, doctors have med kits and engineers have gizmo kits, and sometimes all you can do is fire that kit, hope it hits, and hope that they pass the fizz check. And you know what? Sometimes your models will pleasantly surprise you. They'll get back up and they'll be a nuisance for the rest of the game.
And consider if you need to move your engineer or doctor up the board anyways. It
Yeah,
might be order efficient to move them up, and while they're moving up, pop a med dart off.
yeah.
Not the loss of much distance, but you might pick that model back up.
Yeah, if you've got Fiddler with her like 2 jackbots and a save bot, and you need to get it up the field, and it's passing, I don't know, TR bot or something like that. Yeah, give it a shot. You're only gonna lose 4 inches of movement on her, and you're gonna, like you said, gain an extra order.
Yep. Okay. So we looked at your resources. So what's your opponent's situation? And this is basically, did they make any mistakes you can capitalize on? So did they overextend themselves? That's a pretty common mistake, or not necessarily a mistake, but opening that will present itself after someone makes an alpha strike. Did they push forward and leave key pieces stranded on your side with no support? Did they not reinforce their ARO lines and leave you with a clear run down the side of the board?
Yeah.
Additionally, did they do the mission? Did they completely ignore the mission? If they ignored the mission, you've got an opening. Go do the mission before they do. Get ahead there.
So that's almost the opposite of what I was saying. Is look at the long term. If you've got a
Yes.
scenario where the points are scored as you do a particular action, especially in something like I think it's still mind wipe. I think you get a point for flicking a switch, but also it means you can flick the switch. You figure out what your opponent has to do, and when we were talking about making it difficult for your opponent, you go, "I'm going to put all my defensive resources on stopping you from touching that button."
Yes. Yeah.
Or even countermeasures. Sometimes being alpha can work to your advantage. You
Oh,
can
I
use
mean,
your
look,
recovery pieces to.
if unless the opponent drew like predator and like ones that are good to do on dead bodies, yeah, celebrate getting alpha on countermeasures when they do nothing.
One thing to consider, it is more of an advanced thing that we will not get into in this episode beyond this. If they have alphaed you and ignored the mission, consider trying to score a couple objective points and then bait them into putting you into retreat. It is not the easiest thing to do, but it is an option that can present itself.
Take some pretty precise calculations to do it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and you have to be able to make sure that you complete more points in your turn than your opponent can complete in their turn. There's lots of nuance around it.
Yeah.
I've been the victim of putting my opponent into retreat before. I've never lost to it, but I've definitely drawn games that I should have won. And the little flash pulse bot that could, the 7 points that my opponent had left, used its one order to jump onto the the middle point of acquisition. And what's worth the most in that mission? It's the middle point,
That's
being
really funny.
controlling the middle
Yep.
point of
It's
acquisition.
really funny.
That turned from a 4-0 victory or a 4-1 victory for me into a 4-4 draw in a tournament. So being in retreat could be a potentially positive experience, a positive play for you. It's difficult to do.
Not what I would recommend you try for unless you really feel comfortable and know what you're doing.
Yeah. Often I find that if that would ever to be a solution to cross your mind, it's probably that you've got something that you've got like a couple of orders left and you've got one big piece, and that the having that one big piece is the only reason you're not in retreat. And so yeah, you would do something, put that guy out defensively, and you'd say, "Come and get him," and either he survives because he's obviously a strong piece, something like a Kreezer or something like that, or he dies, and yeah, your opponent's like, "Shit, I got to do something to make sure that I don't lose this game." It's a difficult, yeah, but you're right, it is a difficult thing to do, and I think especially experienced players become cognizant when you're like, I've killed a lot right now and have to be really careful that I don't kill anything anymore. We've got there running to the back line, and it's good to point out that obviously when you get alpha, it's by something big, something fast, good shot armor, what have you. But those things are only as good as the orders that you can pump into them. So and this is like sort of, I suppose, more like typified in like a if someone's like running a Marut or someone's running the Avatar, is there's generally a lot of backline near defenseless pieces like Imitrons or Net Rods, Flash Pulse Bots, even the Icadron Batroid, right? Really properly defensive baggage bots. If you can get up and let's say take out 5 of those, it may not feel as good as like killing main pieces, but suddenly the avatar, well, the tag or whatever, has got 5 less orders to play with.
Yeah.
Right. That in itself can be worth it.
So yeah, I guess with the overextend, there's 2 ways to look at it. One, do they have an unsupported key piece like a tag that's now all by itself, and you could surround it, set up good attack runs on it, and take it from advantageous angles? Or did they leave open a path for you to run? And this would even combi rifle, boarding shotgun into their back line and just clear out the cheerleaders.
I mean, if you're lucky enough
Mm-hmm.
and you're like got one of like there's no maybe the Raz, yeah, but there's no really powerful weapon on something with like parachutist drop zone. Like there's not like a Spitfire or something like that. But
What? The Rathian has a Spitfire.
does it have a
Yes.
Spitfire? Okay, well
Yes, it does.
I'll ignore him, right? Because he's fucking amazing.
Also, like, yeah, it's hard to. But I mean, Margot has a BS-14 AP rifle. Like,
She does.
they're
She
big.
does. But they're still all like damage 13, 14, what have you. But anyway, you get those into the back line. There may not be big juicy targets there, but get rid of the Dr. Worm, get rid of the medics. Hell, I mean, one great thing if you can is get rid of the lieutenant, and then your opponent is in an awful or try to get rid of the lieutenant. Your opponent's in an awful position of crap. I'm in loss of lieutenant now, and what am I going to do?
Just alpha them back.
Yeah, I was about to say it's like alphaing them back.
So
Ah,
at
we've
this
solved
point,
we've solved the issue. Just
Yeah.
guys, forget everything we've said. Just alpha them back.
Can only imagine
Done.
I can only imagine it's like a game of like the most black eyes you've ever seen of just like boom alpha, boom loss of lieutenant, and then something else, and it's like what the hell? Every single turn is this big hit. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a reason why whenever everyone talks about tags or big pieces like that, that you always have to be cognizant of, save 1 or 2 orders to get them back into a
yes,
more defensible position. And if your opponent has left themselves open like that, and you can capitalize on it, capitalize on it.
yep,
Remember again, just getting into melee with some of these things can be the difference between um, your opponent's plan completely going the way that they want, or them having their big piece stuck for a turn. Right, so that can be the aim if you need to be careful, drop smoke, cautious move, or whatever, to just get into melee and survive in there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So what to do with all this information? Um, Make a new plan. Your first plan isn't going to work because you don't have the pieces or the orders. So I guess kind of almost looking at how you can combine all this together. Um, Remember the mission. Go for every objective point you can. Uh, Ignore those that you can't. They no longer exist for you. Don't forget about them entirely because you need to make sure your opponent doesn't do those. Uh, Infinity's a game where a lot of times the casualties don't matter. Everything is expendable. Uh, as long as you score the objective points in the end of the game, it doesn't matter how many models you lost. Um, need to start
Unless
thinking.
unless
Oh,
it's a
sorry.
tie.
Well, okay, yeah.
Unless
It
there's
is a
like a
tiebreaker down there, but yeah,
a freakishly large tie at top table, it doesn't matter.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Start to think asymmetrically. What fights can you push into your favor using models that you wouldn't normally think of as attacking pieces? Uh, and take the risks. You're out of you're on the back foot. You're not going to get ahead by playing it safe. You're going to need to take some risks. Uh,
Yeah, there's gonna be times when you're in this sort of situation where you're going to look at a firefight and go, maybe you have some small advantage, an extra like they've got the burst 1 and you've got the burst 2, but your numbers are crap, or it's just a firefight you're not necessarily comfortable with. Well, you're not in a comfortable position,
mhm.
and in this case, you're just going to have to hope that it works out.
Sometimes
Sometimes your best option is not a good option.
Hmm.
sometimes a Fusilier missile launcher, calling Fusilier missile launcher inactive can just downrange things. You know,
Yeah.
you've just got to play to your outs. And if
The
if,
Yeah.
if your out is using the longest range piece you can, even if it's on burst 2, to like potentially kill something. Hell, even like stand your guided missile bot up and fire a missile at something within 40 inches. Sometimes you just roll a 12. You need to take those risks, and if it's one order that potentially gets rid of a whole bunch of theirs, it's worth it.
Yeah.
there's
Maybe probably go to the next one because that's the and just start
Yeah.
with the summary because I think this slide ends up wrapping too much into that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, really you've got to relax some, focus on what you need to. I realize that's much easier said than done. Um, don't forget the mission. Play the mission. That's how you win the game. You don't necessarily win the game by killing models, unless it's firefight. And remember what scores you tournament points. So if you can keep your opponent's objective points low, you can aim for a defensive bonus. If you think you can pick up 5 random points from around the battlefield, go for it. That's an offensive bonus. That will keep you up in tournament points in the end.
See, even
Uh,
if you're in a tournament, see it as an opportunity to make a new friend as well.
Yeah.
mm,
You know, your opponent's going to walk away from that feeling like it's a very positive experience if you return positivity back to them after you've been alphaed. It's hard. It's hard to just be to have that positivity, especially if you're like feeling like you could possibly win this game going into it, or that you need to win the game, or if it's bloody top table of your 80-player tournament. It's the biggest one of the year, and you are 4-0, and you need to win this game to win the tournament, and you get alphaed. I know it's hard to be positive. Just be positive. Be that good sportsman, because the game is temporary.
And to the person, again, especially in a tournament setting, there's nothing wrong with aiming for an alpha. But if you really succeed at crushing your opponent, you know,
mm,
acknowledge that you did right, that you put your sorry, I should say accept that you put your opponent in a hard position, help them out, be apologetic, or at the very least kind.
Remember
mhm.
that you did a horrible thing and you're a bad person.
Yes, exactly. Anyone who's like I alphaed someone and they get like sense of glee from it, right? They're just like not a good person. If you're
Come
getting
to me and join Josh's No Breaks
yeah,
Club.
if you are getting a sexual thrill out of it, turn yourself in because you're a psychopath.
Oh God.
I cannot tell you how many psychopaths are like that's their jam. Just being mean.
Yeah, that's
Mean.
true.
Mean. It's a good way of describing murdering people.
You're a mean,
It's a
mean man.
being a meanie. Um,
Yeah,
but
I guess it's not the end of the world. It might be the end of that game, but like I said, you can still find ways to have fun. You can still make new objectives for yourself. Like, I can't score OP. How many points can I deny my opponent?
I can't score OP. I can't deny my opponent's points. But how many orders will it take me to take out his Knight of Holy Sepulchre with Yuriko Oda?
yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
It's 5, by the way. It's 5.
If you get can't get back into the game by like doing something funny to your opponent, if you can't see a way of getting any objective points or like meaningfully impacting your score, and you don't right, and you've managed to fully resist the urge to just GG and walk away, go for a fucking moral victory, right? Do something like funny that makes you feel good about what you managed to achieve in Infinity, because half of the time the stories that we tell about a game of Infinity aren't necessarily like, oh, I did this and this is how I won and this tournament, and it's sort of dry. I think like from CanCon, one of my favorite things was my moderator paralyzed a Fide, survived the first close combat, the next close combat managed to paralyze him.
Fantastic.
Right, that's an awesome story to tell, and is something that you can be happy about, even proud of if you want. So there's things that you can do to not necessarily recover the game, but I suppose recover your fun.
Yes.
Um,
Uh,
And play to your outs.
yeah,
a lot of a lot of good stories come from. So I was down to 3 pieces, and this is what I pulled off with those 3 pieces.
yeah, and I, I don't think I don't think I like stories more than when the opponent talks about them getting their asses kicked, because they're like, oh, this was fucking amazing, or this was like a really good idea,
Mhm.
right? And I can't, and I like, I gotta learn from this, and I should do
Mhm.
this next time. Um, I mean, it's that old sort of adage that you don't really like learn from your successes, but you like your greatest successes, you learn from some of your greatest failures, right? I remember, like, again, my tournament game against Ryan, right? I got to learn that you don't hard second vanilla Eugene.
Well,
But
I think
that's
we
beyond.
could sum up the so you just got alpha after hard seconding into vanilla Eugene slide to being yeah dumb.
Yeah,
Don't do that.
yeah.
Don't do that.
It's just take your lumps, boy.
Yeah,
Um,
hard second is not something that you should strive to be able to do,
yeah,
listeners.
and as
Hard second is something you should not attempt unless you really know what you're doing,
more,
or you
I
think it's the only way you can win the match.
no, I
should define hard second though. Hard
Oh,
second in Australian slang is when you deem the mission is more appropriate for going second. Your opponent chooses to deploy for you to deploy first, and you choose second, or you just choose second when you
mm,
keep initiative.
mhm,
It's putting yourself on the back foot because your opponent sees your full deployment before you go second and before they go first. Um, so it allows your opponent the maximum amount of information going into their first turn.
yeah,
mhm,
It is difficult to pull off. I mean, it can be beneficial in certain missions.
mhm.
For example, the armory is one of them. Pong is one of them. Um, any mission that says not suitable for reinforcements is probably one of those missions where
yeah.
you can hard second and win. But it's something it's very difficult to do, and if you're tempted by it, don't be.
Wait, hold on. Did they change the ITS document to say not suitable for
No,
reinforcements?
I think
they
they say
suitable for reinforcements. So the ones that don't say suitable for reinforcements.
yeah, they say the ITS document says this mission is suitable for reinforcements.
Okay. And the other thing, and this goes to more sort of, I guess, avoiding being alphaed, is um, talk to your community, right? Talk to whatever that fucking sage you have in your community. The old Rafiki guy that sits in the corner, um, slowly levitating around. Um, and sort of learn what you need to look out for in like what the person's playing, right? When you have to worry about like an alpha. So I'm trying to think of a slow-ish army. I suppose NCA, it's a slower sort of army. Maybe I don't know. There'll be armies that are not necessarily fast. They have other advantages. I'm gonna say, and I know this is wrong, right? But Bakunin minus the Uber files is not really going to look at like a super strong alpha. But you take a look at something like Assassins, where they have guys that can start off in your deployment zone if your opponent decides to roll it, are obviously going to have really good alpha potential. So if you're super afraid of being alphaed, especially if you're new to the game, just take a time to take a look at all the armies, find the sectorials, or just like the vanilla armies that have like really, really good like speed, super cheap orders, like super cheap regular orders, um, or have things like impersonation, superior infiltration, or infiltration plus 6 is now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
now infiltration plus
yeah.
X.
Deployment zone, parachutist, and all those sorts of things. And even like that'll help you a little bit, but even then, you can probably find a way of making an alpha-able list out of any of the sectorials if you try hard enough.
Yeah, and a lot of the don't get alphaed. There are plenty of tutorials out there on how to deploy, and
Yeah.
not getting alpha is a lot of down to deploying properly. Um, that said, even deploying properly does not always protect you. There can be angles you don't see, and your opponent may just be that good.
Yeah. Often what you're going to find is your deployment is going, a good deployment against a good opponent in a mission where they might be able to sort of focus more on killing. The best thing your deployment's going to do is going to stem the bleeding, right? You're going to lose a little bit, maybe not as maybe more than you'd like, maybe less than you like, but nothing that would necessarily take you out of the game.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's where your focus needs to be if you're really, really afraid of being alpha, is to make sure that your deployment is as difficult to unpick for your opponent as possible, or at the very least, made in such a way that it's not worth your opponent trying to unpick it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I
Wow.
think we have reached the end.
Yeah, so a
Wonderful.
little bit shorter episode today, guys. A little bit of not a lull or anything, but we haven't got a
Mhm,
huge amount of news coming our way.
mhm.
But we will be sort of, I suppose, I'm sure, doing Road to. Oh God, what's a nice name for Road to Border Bash?
Well, I wrote to Arcfinity first.
True.
Or Border Bash. Oh no, Jordan. Yeah, so I think that yeah, have a listen to this one, guys. You know, throw a couple of practice games in if you struggle with being alphaed, and just remember that this is a game,
Yeah.
and we're all here to have fun.
And if you see this on your Facebooks, on the Discord or anything, you're one of our Patreon listeners or you're one of our regular listeners, let us know your stories of alphaing and being alphaed, so we can either shame you or, we can start a support group. AA, Alpha Anonymous.
Being alphaed anonymous.
Yeah. All right,
Ah,
guys. Uh, Thank you very much for listening. I've been Jacob.
I've been Nick.
And I'm Josh.
Good night.